Before I turn it over to my esteemed colleagues up here to introduce themselves, let me kind of set the stage for everybody. One of the things that I've been told about doing presentations is you got to under-promise and over-deliver. So I can promise you that this is not going to be a very boring presentation. So to kind of set the stage, let's talk about Starbucks. I found out that there's a new game in town. It's called Starbucks. Are they going to get your order right? So I'm addicted to Starbucks. I'm a coffee snob. I got up at 6 o'clock this morning and stood in line for 30 minutes to get a cup of coffee, and there was a volleyball team there, and I was getting a sugar high looking at all of the drinks that they were ordering. Now, why do I mention Starbucks? Because Starbucks is an example of data analytics. They understand what I am looking for. I'm not looking for a cup of coffee. I'm not one of those people who's going to pay $5 for a cup of coffee. I'm one of those people who wants the experience. I'm one of those people who walks into Starbucks, they know my name, they say hi to me. It's like Norman Cheers. And they know what my drink order is going to be. They track me, so I can go to the Starbucks here, press a button, and they know what I'm going to have ahead of time. So the format that we're going to follow, we're going to do introductions. We're going to have a discussion on 4 different segments. We're going to have a definition of what data analytics is, how it's used, how do you start data analytics, and then we're going to address some of the concerns with respect to data analytics. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to do it through questions. And I'm going to direct questions to specific panelists. And then, if there's, some additional follow-on, another panelist may jump into that. So why don't we go ahead and start, and I'll have Jim go ahead and introduce himself first.
That'd be great, Skip. Thank you everyone for being here, and those who are watching through live stream. My name is Jim Fasone, and I have a broader business consulting company I founded called Strategist, and within that I do risk management consulting. I work as a subject matter expert on a number of topics, and most recently, very excited to be involved with a data analytics company that's coming to market around anomaly detection. And what fascinates me about the world of finance and healthcare that I've been in my entire corporate career is that there's always ways to take information you already have and make it actionable. And that's why I love being a part of this panel, and I appreciate being here.
Faith, go ahead.
Absolutely, thanks, Skip. So hi everyone, this is Faith James. I'm the CEO and founder of the personal branding consultancy. I've spent the past 25 plus years working for Fortune 500 brands like IBM, Mary Kay, Microsoft, AD Edwards, Liberty Mutual, just to name a few. So the idea of really focusing on data, and that data is something that everybody gets to understand, everybody gets to leverage, and really excited to be part of this panel to facilitate this discussion.
Young, go ahead.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Young Pham, CEO of Finite Business Solutions. That is basically an outsourcing accounting and finance back office firm. And we also have a sister company that's under our umbrella called Archer, and that is literally our data analytics and aggregation arm. And so we're very excited to be able to have a conversation today about how we utilize some of these different tools that has real world application to all of us, no matter what walks of life we were in, professionally and things like that. So looking forward to the conversation. Thank you guys for joining.
Parag?
Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Parag Nivetia from Easy Funding Solutions. We're basically a business finance advisory and consulting company where I use 20 years of my banking experience and about 10 years of consulting now to basically develop a framework to gather data, relevant data for banks, for borrowers to get them to become bankable, to be able to go into a bank and look for funding. Besides that, we have about 10 different services as well. So thank you so much for this great opportunity.
And Farouk, fine.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Farouk Firchichi, and I'm the Chief Data Analytics Officer for InvestNet. InvestNet mission is really to make financial wellness a reality for everyone, and we do that by connecting the experiences of consumers, whether they're in a spending stage of their financial evolution, to their saving, to their investing experience, as well as their protecting experience. In order to do that, data is core to making all this happen by connecting those experiences and aggregating and transforming and powering the data to everyone to every participant in the ecosystem of the financial wellness ecosystem. I'm pretty excited today to have this conversation.
And I'm Skip Langley. I'm in charge of an internal audit department at an insurance company. Everybody knows what insurance is. So let's go ahead and start the questions. Parag, the first question is for you. How would you define data analytics?
So, kind of put this up. Wikipedia basically defines data analytics as a process of inspecting, cleansing, transforming, and modeling data with a goal of discovering useful information and supporting decision making, right? So in my own experience, there's a lot of data available, right? You pay for some, you buy data, you have a lot of relevant information on Wikipedia or Google. Like core facts, you have IBIS World in the banking field that we've used, Business Resource Guide, we've used Reference USA, etc. Now, in my opinion, it's the act of kind of gathering all the relevant data, kind of implementing that towards, applying it effectively to the business, to the goal that me as a banker is looking at, right? So if my end result is to get an approval, how do I take all the data to basically apply it towards getting the right information for the underwriters to make sure that we can get to the end result, which is an approval. So.
And Farouk, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I have a lot to add, but I'm going to try to keep it short here. Parag brings up what I believe to be, we've been doing a lot for so many years in the banking particularly experiences around using data and applying the analytics on top of that data to help make underwriting decisions, do the applicant for that loan, whether that's a commercial loan or a consumer, direct-to-consumer lending loan like a credit card or mortgage or what have you. Yeah, absolutely. And also in the pricing. The step that comes after decisioning whether you're approved or not, there's a lot of data analytics applied. However, a lot of that decisions using data analytics to support the underwriting and the pricing decision is really product-centric and not taking in consideration a lot of the latest consumer data is available out there in the market. So the second point I'd like to make, though, is many banking organizations are exploring the alternative data. Because I like to joke a little bit about this and say, my credit score, which is historically used to make a decision of an approved or not on a loan application, may not be indicative enough of what I can bring to the table to a given bank to allow me to get the credit. If I am using Facebook to showcase that I'm driving a Ferrari every night and I am eating sushi and drinking sake every night, I think I can, and I do that consistently over the past couple of years, I think I can afford to pay you back, and that probability to pay is different. So if alternative data is about figuring out other sources of consumer data that may be applicable to change the way we decide on these loans, and for banking in general to not disadvantage people just because the traditional, more historical data is really not sufficient to decide on people approval. The last point I'd like to make here is that as I'm working with people more and more in the front lines and understand their needs, they're not really needing more data. They are really needing more from data. And I know that's playing with the word a little bit, sequencing. However, needing more from data. I think people are indebted with spreadsheets. I think they're embedded with all the BI reports and the management reports and all the drilling down and all those cool things that were relevant 10 years ago. Now people want recommendations. I think at the end of the day, they want the next best action of what they need to do. If I'm a financial advisor and I'm having a client call in the next 30 minutes, what is it that I need to advise my client and ultimately have the control over what I present to the client? But give me the three top five things that I need to have a conversation with my client about.
Does anybody else have anything else to add to that?
I would, Skip. I would say this. We really need to get away from the whole stigma of data analytics, right? I think a lot of us, when we think of that, we think of a very technical automation, bots, things of that nature. Unfortunately, our culture today, we live in a world of $100, words and acronyms, right? I always like to make the joke. I know I'm getting old because the older I get, the more I hate the youth. Unfortunately, there's so many buzzwords and lack of attention now. I would say at the root of the words of data analytics, it's statistics, right? It's data that you need to use to be able to make informative decisions that better you. So, when we think of it that way and we strip away all of the complexities of it, right, I think that's going to be more beneficial for all of us. And it's definitely something where statistics, data, everyone uses, regardless of if you're in the banking sector, the finance sector, marketing, or anything like that as well. So.
And I would add data analytics, not just for the Fortune 10, not just for the mega, not just for the 1%er. You're going to hear conversations about how a micro entrepreneur, how small businesses actually get to use data analytics as well to make informed decisions. So stay tuned.
So Faye, segueing off of that,
Sure.
you're a marketing and branding
Yes.
professional. So how do you use data analytics?
Brilliant question. So as I just said, data is the data, and you use it, information, you can use it in a variety of ways. So I'll give you a true story that actually literally just happened this past week. I said to my husband, who's like, hey, Team Faith, he's up there recording. I said, oh my gosh, we have a runner, a client, I'm like literally run out of the barn. They were looking at their social media, and again, who here has ever had any sort of like comparisonitis? Oh, this person's IG look like it's completely blowing up. They're doing so many amazing things. I should be doing the same thing too. Then they ring up the agency. It's like, we need to do more. We need more, better, faster. And because I had data, so I have a software that I use in my agency where it analyzes your performance, your key performance indicators across your social media platforms. So your Facebook, your Instagram, your Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn is coming, where it looks at brand activity, it looks at brand engagement, it looks at applause, it looks at share. So by putting in the two individuals, two companies that she was comparing herself to, she works for one of the largest law firms in South Florida, I was able to map data, here are your brand activity, here's the engagement, here are the applause, and here are the share numbers compared to you and your two competitors, and it showed, just in black and white and a little bit of color, the report that she in fact had the highest level of brand engagement, but without that data, because the data don't lie, right? The data are your truth tellers. I was able to use this report to settle her down, as I said, bring her back in the barn, and everybody's happy now. And so that's a really simple way if you just understand that data can be your friend. It's not, we were talking about, it's not this big, huge behemoth Goliath thing that you're like shrieking in the background from. It's just really information that helps you lead from the front. It's information that helps you really be stellar. Another way that we use it in our agency is for all of our companies, whether they're corporates or they're individuals, we do a 360 professional analysis. So it's a measure of how you are seen, how you're showing up in the marketplace. So as I was telling my colleagues this morning, it could be where I go, oh my gosh, I'm the most amazing motivational speaker ever. This is how I'm going around town. And then the data, which is comprised of a 360 view, everybody who's in your sphere, so friends, families, clients, mentors, former clients, suppliers, vendors, doesn't matter. They have a point of view on your brand. They answer the same research questions about you. And if your question on, whether you would be the leader or not, and you say, oh yeah, I'm for sure the leader, but 86% of the respondents come back and say, yeah, you're very much the project manager, then you see you have divergence, right? I'm seeing myself as a leader, world's seeing me as a project manager, problem. So that's when you're spending and you're doing marketing and you're spending dollars and you're like, nobody's buying my stuff, it's because your reputation in the marketplace is that you're not what you say you are, and that's where the work gets to be done first before you spend tons of ad dollars. So that's how data, again, helps me help my client manage their dollars more efficiently. It's like, fix this first and then that.
Just let me throw in if I can, Skip. So Faith's comments are beautiful because they tie in what Young just talked about. This is a perfect example of a rifle-focused solution that she's using to help her customers understand their positioning. And what Young was talking about, and this is one of the myopic things a lot of companies get faced with, where do we start? It's such a big issue, right? She's found one thing that her clients might have benefit for, and she can either build it herself, right, do a DIY project, hire programmers, figure out, okay, this is what I'm looking for, or she goes to the market and see if there's a solution that will help her clients better. And I think that's a great example of what many of you out here in the audience are faced with, is where do we start? Well, what I advise clients on start, what are your current top 3 business challenges, business problems, competitive issues, retention, client growth, et cetera? Is there any data that supports those top 3 challenges? With that data, there's all kinds of nuggets to be found. It's just a matter of how you extract it and actually do something with it.
Brilliant.
And so that's the recommendation you would have for a business owner in general, is just, start small and build your way up? Or?
Well, small businesses in particular, relative to budget and the size of their problem and the amount of data they probably have. But one of the challenges even big businesses have, and you read a lot of research and information coming out from HBR and Deloitte and Gartner and all this stuff, they make it seem like you have to change your entire infrastructure and culture to embrace this enterprise-wide change. No, you don't. They're just trying to support their consulting's going in there for 2 years to figure out what they're going to do with you. There's all kinds of one-off solutions that are very rifle focused, that are available. It's just, you got to start with, what are my issues?
Yeah.
What am I trying to solve?
And Parag, we understand that you're not a data analyst. You're a former banker. How do you see uses of that in what you do?
So again, from a credit perspective, as an underwriter, basically the data that we have used in the banking world really is kind of putting all the pieces together, right? The story of the project, right? The objective of what the borrower is trying to accomplish, his vision, obviously his or her vision, the subject of the project, again, the background, the why. Why do you want to do what you want to do, and how are you going to do what you want to accomplish? It's about the model of the business. It's about the team, the right team to put together so that you can actually not do everything by yourself, but actually have the right people in the right channels to basically accomplish the goal of the business, really, the objective of the business. Then you're talking about the operation. Depending on whichever business it is, every business has a model. So if you, again, stress on how your turnover, customer turnover, is important to kind of elaborate from the information as well. It could be a restaurant, so you have a table turnover ratio. It could be a laundromat. It could be a doctor's practice, your patient turnover. So it's important to really bring that part of the puzzle as well in your data, so that when you present it to the right lender, now they have all that information along with marketing, right? Where do you procure your supplies from if you're in manufacturing, right? So you want to talk about marketing, you want to talk about sales at the ground level as well. And then you want to talk about who the guarantors are, right? Now we're talking about personal income, we're talking about how your credit, how you've made payments, debt obligations on time in the past as well, because the new lender wants to see that information. So they retrieve that information from your TransUnion, your credit reports, and kind of use that information, that data, and kind of apply it on this subject project that, the funding that you're looking at. The strengths and the weaknesses, the SWOT analysis to kind of finish up and summarize the entire project, really, talking about the strengths and the weaknesses and the opportunities and threats in that industry, right? So it's all about gathering all this data, all the pieces of the moving parts of the puzzle to give the lender enough data to make that right decision. Now, too much data also may not be very good, because too much data can actually go on the opposite side. It's like too much, And it's like, I don't know if I really needed to know this much. So you have to be cognizant of there's too much information available, but you want to be able to be precise to the point as quick as you can, because that's the amount of time that you really have to impress a lender. So that's my 2 cents on gathering information and presenting to a lender.
Okay, and Farouk, I mean, there's a lot of data out there. And I think, is this a true statement or not, that a lot of companies have the data, they just don't know how to use it, how to manipulate it, how to do it. So do you have any advice on how to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really big question.
Well, I asked the hard ones to the person that sits at the very end. So.
It's going to take
It is
more
a
than
hard
50 minutes for that one. So.
However, I'd like to build upon my colleagues' statements earlier about, let's take the small business before I go after the big business. The small business historically thought about embracing this data analytics as a big curve to climb. And we just heard a real example today of how the barriers historically that been stopping small business owners and management teams to actually leverage data analytics to scale their business and manage their business are behind us, because the technology has been commoditized over the past decade at least to allow the small guy, like a small business, to have access to data they need at a lower price. And that's thanks to the technology advancements. At the same time, now they're demanding more. I think to the conversation we just heard earlier, they're demanding, again, less give me more data, but give me what to do with that data. And I think we also heard a real example for that. Big companies are dealing with the same thing. I would say the difference, though, is that with big companies, there is the variable of regulatory controls that comes into play on how to use that data. And so, if y'all may heard in the past, people use the word data asset loosely. We're going to manage our data as an asset. I think a lot of folks say that, but when you interact with them on a daily basis, you don't feel like they're managing their data as an asset. For some of us in the financial services and insurance industry, when we say the word assets, we refer back to the balance sheet. And we refer back to the liability and the asset side of managing the balance sheet. And a good big organization has to tackle data as an asset by looking at the things that could go wrong from managing the data, like having the regulatory controls in place, starting with having the right consent from the end consumer, so you can honor the consumer wishes for how their data should be used. At the same time, they should find ways to understand and build a business that based on the understanding of the consumer, so they can offer the best products, the best prices, the best services on the back end on how they manage the portfolio and serve that client. However, you find a lot, companies have not cracked this balance of managing data as an asset. And that's where we see the frontier going for big companies, is it's not a lack of talent, in my opinion, although that's true. It's not a lack of technology. It's a lack of management architecture of how we use data to actually run the business while stay compliant.
And I'm an auditing professional, so I can give you a little bit of a different perspective on how I would use data. One of the things that we're responsible for in internal audit is to ensure that the management is following proper policies and procedures, that they're entering into transactions correctly and things like that. And in the past, what we would do is we'd take a random sample, and if you work for a large company, and I work for a company that's 1.7 billion in revenue, which is considered a small to mid-sized insurance company. And we do millions of transactions in a year. And if you do a random sample, you're gonna look at 370 something transactions. That's not going to get you the information that you're going to be able to need, to be able to use. So what if you could take those millions of transactions and run some sort of analysis on them and pull out the ones that are anomalous. And what I mean by anomalous is there are things that just don't make sense. And I don't know if everybody's aware of what the Benford's Law is, but essentially the number one, the number one appears 9 times more frequently than the number 9 does. And so what that means is if you look at a series of transactions and you see a bunch of them that are around a certain number that starts with 5, and it's at a higher percentage than it should be, then maybe you need to look at those transactions. Now, just because those transactions are anomalous doesn't mean that there's fraud going on, doesn't mean that there's errors going on, but it scopes down into a level that's a lot more manageable to look at. So does anybody else have anything to add to that perspective?
The only thing I would add to that is when you're thinking about the analysis of the data and whether you are being consumer focused or not, is everybody gets to have this, what do they want? What does a consumer want? Because the data is there to be in service to your customers, your clients, your end user. I will posit that the data is not there to be your servant, right? Your data is there for you to provide better, different, more good services for the benefit of the consumer. Oftentimes, marketers, brands will say, oh, well, how's this gonna help us sell more of this SKU? And this SKU might not be what they want, but here we go, still trying to push, shove, cajole this SKU. And if we as marketers, as brands, can really take a consumer-centric eye that says the data is what's going to be the breadcrumbs that lead you to what they actually want. Also adding psychographic data, very important. Do not sleep on the psychographics, the attitudes, one of the things we talk about in my agency is the even though, nevertheless, a mindset. How are you looking at mindset data that's going to tell you mindset, right? Sushi and Ferrari equals, a little bit more gusto, a little bit more risk management, risk tolerance, et cetera. How do we use the intangible data that are also performance indicators as well? So what do they want? What I would add.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing to add to that, I think the data topic can be really multi-challenging. One is the generational challenge that we are facing at the workforce. We're probably living in an era where at least 4 generations are working together. Now, we're not going to get into why, but definitely there are a generational perspective on how they deal with data. The second thing is purely abstract. It's not something you touch. However, the key challenge for all of us in the data space, particularly in the finance and insurance industry, is how to humanize the data. And the best way I can think of, in my experience, is delivering it. So having good models, good insights, good recommendation, good thoughts from data, it's nice. However, how are you going to serve it back to the consumer when they're having their fun day in the mobile experience or in the web or in the conversation or in TV or what have you? That's, I think, the most important part moving forward is figuring out the delivery mechanism of all the data insights moving forward to reach the clients directly.
You have something to add, Jen?
Yeah, I do, because Farouk said something earlier, and it kind of resonated with me relative to companies starting to look at data as an asset, right? So it sounds great, okay, data should be an asset, but what does every C-suite person, CFO, finance person want to do with an asset? You have to assign a value, right? So I really think we're on the forefront of emerging technology with machine learning and AI that we really can start valuing what the data means to the company. And it's going to be very different to every company. So if I'm the CFO of a big publicly traded company, I know the value of every asset on a balance sheet, because if I don't, the SEC is going to come down on me for misrepresenting the asset value. But internally, if you have off-balance sheet valuations on an intangible like data that's so powerful to improve your operating efficiencies, so powerful to increase client retention, so powerful to grow your customers, and as Faith's saying, to understand a lot of the intangible things on buying habits and things of that nature, that could be the greatest asset you own and just don't know it.
Yeah.
So with great power comes great responsibility. And so some of the things that we need to be considered when we're using data is the integrity of the data. I mean, is this data warehouse that you're pulling the information from, does it have all of the data in it? Is it complete? Has somebody gone into that data warehouse and manipulated it in some way so that the information that you're getting out when you're doing analysis is no longer correct? Or does the link that went to that data warehouse, did that somehow get corrupted and now you're going to someplace else and are the results of the report or the information that's coming out, are they making sense? So do you have a responsibility not only to make sure that the data is correct, but also that the information that is derived from that data is correct? So if you've got financial information, for instance, and you've derived it from this data warehouse, and you're presenting this financial information out to the public, you have a responsibility to make sure that that financial information ties back to your audited financial statements if you're required to do that. In the insurance industry, we have something called an annual statement. They call it the yellow book, blue book, whatever line of business that you're in, to make sure that that is able to be tied to a number. Because if you put a number out there and you can't tie it to something, then what good is it? And then the other thing I would say with respect to data, and I'm going to let Faith address this a little bit, is the privacy concerns. So Faith, if you could discuss that a little bit.
Absolutely. So let me just touch on the first bit. My strong recommendation would be to assign a C-level suite responsibility seat at the table. So a CDO, your Chief Data Officer. If you don't have one, get one, thinking about finding one. Because then that accountability, right, the saying that people help support what they create. If you assign roles and responsibilities to somebody that says this data, which is supposed to be this greatest asset that we're going to mine to get into a much more sort of closely aligned, intuitive relationship with our clients, then somebody needs to be responsible. Somebody gets to be responsible for that, and they get to sit at the C-suite table so that when there becomes a question, in the eventuality, listen, right, we are in a fallen world. In the eventuality that the data either gets corrupted or somebody does something nefarious, that there is somebody who's saying, I am responsible because I am the CDO, and these are the steps, and here are the mitigating forces that we're going to do X, Y, and Z. So we're not victim, as I said before, we're nobody's victim. We're not victim to the dark web, we're not victim to anybody. We really just stand as source that we move forward, even though, yes, the eventuality may become that privacy issues are a concern, but you're putting a policy in place and ways to mitigate that, being proactive, not reactive. Second, privacy. As I said, privacy comes, at a cost, and a cost in a good sense. So for example, my husband and I, we took the opportunity to go through the whole sort of global travel experience to be always TSA pre. So our convenience, our ability to move quickly through the airports of the world, not taking off the shoe, leave my computer alone. It's like packed tight with 10 books, don't open it, right? Comes at a price that I value that says, yeah, what do you need more from me? You want to know my date of birth, you want to know my origin of, I'm willing to give knowing full well that I'm giving over access to maybe more than would be required, and that it's a dance, it's a transaction. It's like if Jim and I were doing the cha-cha, right? If he's going back, my right leg is naturally going forward because we're in unison together, so it's a dance. You either decide to participate in the dance or you don't. These are choices that we make fully well knowing that stuff could happen, but is my convenience, the idea that I'm able to give more, again, Amazon Prime, more information, credit cards on file, all the like, history of addresses, et cetera, and I get my books next day. And so there's a price that I'm willing to pay. Prices that I'm willing to pay are. So I would say, yes, it's an eventuality. Make sure you have places, you have situations in place, you have a person identified to say this is the game plan, and off we go. Gentlemen,
Yeah.
what say you?
Well, and I would say that not only that, but the other big pitfall that we have to be careful about when we start diving into data analytics is data correlation, right? Causation effects. I remember years ago in college, if you guys ever took a logic class where we dealt with fallacies, right? Or we talked about psychology, there was that ongoing story where they did in the 1950s where some statistics were ran where, you know, the increase of ice cream sales correlated to the increase of murders in the city, right? So obviously there's data there, but is there causation for that data? So you have to be very careful in being able to also implement that correctly. And I think that's kind of where, you know, I'd like to take this conversation to also is how do we go about implementing this on a day-to-day basis for every single one of us, right? Understanding that the pitfalls, you want to build that into your system. You want to understand that it's incremental. You know, to Parag's point earlier, you don't want to oversaturate yourself with too much data right off the bat. In my prior life working in corporate America, you know, I was part of a very successful organization that decided after viewing what Starbucks and Amazon and all these, you know, large tech conglomerates wanted to do, they wanted to get in the data game. They didn't understand what that meant. They spent millions of dollars collecting all this data. They invested, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars in Power BI, and then they decided to give all of us all these reports, even at branch level organizers. None of us were, were taught what to look at with the data. There was no change management to actually explain what this data represented. So what did these operators do? They threw it in the trash, or they didn't log into it, right? And so for us, and for me, from my unique perspective as being a small business owner, I am no longer on the, you know, the large billion-dollar side of the industry. We look at it from two different angles, right? How do we get better from an operational perspective? Finite and Archer, for example, uses our data analytics by looking at our staff, looking at our personality, right? And we try to build teams of pods that have complementary, you know, personalities. It's not even just skill sets that you need. You know, I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of a DIS assessment, right? Where you're a D, you're an IS, or a C. And what we've realized is there's a proper composition with each team that makes them a highly more productive than there are otherwise. And on the other side of the spectrum, you know, you look at your key performance indicators. You know, in good faith for us being in Las Vegas, I would say it's the same thing for anyone that's been overwhelmed with the idea of walking up to a craps table, right? You don't want to learn all of it at once. There's about 200 different ways to play craps, right? You learn one angle, you learn the pass line, or you learn the dark side, and you add to your repertoire over time. Never try to consume all that knowledge at once, because it's just going to be something where you decide that 2 months down the road, you don't want to do it anymore, and now you're behind the curve of everybody else in the market.
So Parag, from a banking and a lending perspective, how have you seen data being misused?
So we've basically used data centers like IBIS World, Reference USA. We've used the Franchise World uses a franchise disclosure document, right? Now it's got the policies and procedures of the franchise. It's got data on how locations have done in the past, kind of a thing. Bankers use that information from the FTDs basically to kind of gauge the risk level on the new location, for example, at the new location. So, you know, if they've been profitable in the past, how many units have failed in the past? You know, can this location, the new location that it's looking at, does it have the right enough population, demographic, to basically, you know, be successful at that location? But they use the information on the FTD to get to that point. They use information on IBIS World, which basically is like a consortium of about 5,000 NIAC codes. So each NIAC code has, like, you know, their strengths, their weaknesses, their barriers to entry, their, you know, all the information that's relevant to underwriting from a credit standpoint to make a better decision on the, you know, on the bank side.
So if you run into any instances where your gut is telling you that this information that you got from IBIS and these other is incorrect, it just doesn't make sense to you.
It does happen sometimes where one-off projects might, you know, it's a lot of data, so certain sections of the report may not be applicable to that particular project as such, and it's okay to, you know, for it not to, because there are some other sections that actually do make sense, so, which can be applicable. So you've got to, as a credit analyst, you want to make sure that the information is relevant so that you can build a case, because that's the ultimate goal, to build the right, you know, case so that we can get to the finish line, which is the approval. On the, there's business resource guide which talks about different ratios, Now that's something that also underwriters basically use, to figure out how much working capital is required. The debt to equity ratio on the projections, is it enough or not? So there's many different rules of thumb that can be applied from IBIS or business reference guide. Basically all the information can be clubbed together to, ensure that, the bank can approve the loan. If there's, like I said, instances where there might be certain sections of the data that may not be applicable, and it's okay as long as now we're looking at the balance, right? There's strengths, and then there might be some weaknesses as well. But let's see what makes more sense. If it's yes, makes sense, and you got two that don't, it's okay. Let's move ahead because you can justify the decision at that point.
So data analytics is a tool to help with the decision process. It's not a substitute for the decision process. Farouk, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think whether you call it data or analytics or AI, it's a partnership between the human who's using it, whether they're an operator answering the phone when a customer calls, or they're a CEO sitting on their desk reviewing a big board package to make multi-million-dollar investment to buy another company. They're all driven by data, and there is a partnership. And assuming that the underlying data integrity is good for the raw data and the modeling associated with it, I would say one additional consideration is context. When you hear it a lot in the news in particular, the accurate facts and data, if put in the wrong context, they can deliver the wrong message to the end consumer. And so it's not just about the accuracy of the underlying data, it's how we use it for what context, as to what message or what business problem or consumer problem we're trying to solve.
Well, thank you, everybody. And we've got about 5 minutes left. Are there any questions from the audience? And I can't see anybody, so Dave, I'm gonna rely on you to tell me if there's any questions or
I
not.
think there's a gentleman on the left.
I think
over there.
Kenneth has a question.
I'm coming. Here I come.
This gives new meaning to the term deer in the headlights.
Now we know why.
Now we know why, yes.
Hopefully you all can hear me since you all can't see me because of the light.
Yes.
But the very informative panel. My name is Ken Burnett. I am the founder and chief business development officer for Litter Hero, a tech firm based out of Austin. And I've learned a lot from Benford's Law to psychographic data to DISC assessments and other intangible data topics. So you all have been very informative in this regard. My question, though, is kind of along the lines of one of Farouk's statements. He kind of touched on the dichotomy of people assuming data analytics is surrounding securing more data versus leveraging data appropriately that's available in the right context. And it's also kind of along the lines of Trung's comment about the correlation of data, and it's really taking data one step further beyond trend analysis to really assessing whether new features, either new practices, pivoting priorities, or new services could be assessed and attained through, hypothesis testing, chi-squared, t-testing. Do you feel like data is necessary for those type of tests? And do you all feel that data analysis in that regard, taking beyond trend analysis to significance testing, adds value, or do you feel like key decision makers should rely on their intuition in that regard?
Young, you want to try that one?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think it's both. Again, we live in a day and age where we want this data analytics to be a market differentiator because we see so many of these large tech companies use that, right? All of our private data to their advantage to be able to sell us things we didn't know we even wanted, right? I look at it the other end of the spectrum. I feel like in your professional careers and as business operators, your intangible assets, your instinct, that sixth sense, is still what's going to differentiate you in the market. The reality, though, is if you get behind the data analytics game, that's where you're going to have issues keeping up with your competitors on just a status quo level. right? And I think that's where it's important to be able to utilize both sets of it and also have some logic and some common sense behind what I actually need to do. And part of that is not getting all the data at once. It's about finding out what are the 2 or 3 key things I want to look at right now to be able to make those decisions. And I think if you do that, you can use that decisions coupled with your fantastic team and your own experience to make a full, refined decision on that.
Absolutely, and really that's where a lot of companies fail, is they don't start with a plan. I mean, it's the same meeting you have in a room with a small team, big team, global team, is what are our business challenges, what are we trying to accomplish, what are our goals? It's just another way to get there, and that's why it doesn't have to be such an insurmountable task to start with some basic elements of what are we trying to accomplish as a business, as a community, as what have you.
So did that answer your question, Kevin? Okay.
And Kevin, let me just add, Steve Jobs, right, we all know, love or hate, depending, and he abhorred research. He knew intuitively in his gut that this is what Apple was, a design company that happens to make computing equipment, computing technology. And he held firm to that, and he was bold, and he was irrational, and he was just a bore sometimes about it, and he was right. And so depending on the CEO, the lead board, with enlarged cojones, to be able to say, this is what we're doing, this is what we're moving forward, this is our hypothesis, we're going to go for it, and we're not going to line 6 people in a room times 20 markets to tell us, because intuitively, my 20 plus years in the industry, the market says this, and go, and be willing to be right or wrong. So you get both sides.
Well, thank you for your time. We're out of time. If you have any questions afterwards, you can approach one of us. We really appreciate you listening in on our conversation. And let me assure you, this is a continuation of a conversation that we had at breakfast. And we were concerned that, if nobody showed up, we would just go ahead and continue this conversation now. But again, thanks a lot, and have a good day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.